Thanks for joining us for another week of racial reconciliation conversations. I wanted to make you aware of a new feature that's on all the previous videos as well as tonight's video. Look in the description section. You'll see all the questions listed as well as a timestamp. Next to the timestamp is a custom URL. Click on that link. It's going to take you directly to the question you're interested in. We hope you find this helpful. Enjoy tonight's call. Okay, tonight's scripture, Psalm 46, 1-4. God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. Therefore, we will not fear. Though the earth give way and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam and the mountains quake with their surging, there is a river whose streams make glad the city of God, the holy place where the Most High dwells. Tim, would you pray for us?
Yes, I will. Heavenly Father God, we just come to you tonight, thanking you for this opportunity just to unite once again on this platform. It's just to exalt you and just your ways and just who you are, Father. And just as David was reading in Psalms, I just like to repeat Psalms 46:10, just be still and know that I am God. Father, have us be still tonight and know who you are and know that you are for us. And Father, just remind us there is only one race, which is the human race. That's the only race that, Father, you have created. Have us rest on that. Have us understand and know that. And Father, just thank you for your love. In Jesus' name, amen.
All right, Cheryl.
Okay, the first question. How do you feel when people call you chocolate, or when white people with black children refer to their children as chocolate? Several people have asked this same question, so we'd love to hear the answer to this one. Tim, let's start with you.
You know, I don't think I've ever heard it or somebody, call me chocolate, except for my dad. He used to call me like, your little chocolate drop. So that was my dad, but I don't think I've ever heard anybody say chocolate. Now, I've heard them call my kids a swirl, a vanilla chocolate swirl, a swirl, but I have not heard chocolate being referenced in a derogatory way or anything that's offensive to me.
How about swirl? What do you think about that when your children are called that?
I've only heard it from people that I know that, it's like a family member, someone outside. At that point, it didn't bother me. Now, me saying mix or hearing mixed, that kind of grates me more than swirl. And then I know I've used the reference of mix before. And even when I've said it, it's kind of like, why am I saying that? That's not a word that I like to use to describe someone. I would rather use biracial. But as we're looking tonight, we're one race, the human race, so.
Okay, Keisha, what do you think about that, being called chocolate, or people referring to people who are black as chocolate?
I haven't really heard that much, no less my son, from other races. What I've heard is from black people referring to themselves as chocolate, but I don't think that it would bother me.
Okay, I think she got cut off. So let's ask Kawana. Kawana, what do you think?
So, I think that to me, it depends on the individual. Because I've heard it before. Once again, normally it's a black parent referring to their child. I've heard them called chocolate chip, chocolate drop, like Tim said. I've heard a lot of different ice cream flavors, thrown out there depending on the race. And I've never heard it in a derogatory way, but once again, if you're speaking of parent to child, it's always, just like a sweet nickname. So I haven't heard it in a derogatory way. I know that it could be used in that way. But I guess I would just say, just make sure you're staying away from primates and raccoons. That's it.
Raccoons, you're saying that You've been called a raccoon?
No, I'm saying like for a parent that has different colored children in their home, POCs in their home, I would make sure, stay away from any primate, my little monkey, my, raccoons. I was, stay away from those. Yeah, because then that would be reinforcing a negative stereotype, even though like, oh, he just climbs around all the time like a little monkey, blah, blah, blah. No, don't.
That's good, Kawana. Michael, what do you say to this question?
Well, in answer to this question, I try to think about it in a slightly different way. So try to answer the question another way. So the first thing I thought of is, how do Caucasians feel when they are called vanilla? Then I said, okay, let me process that. How do Latinos feel when they are called butter pecan? All right, now watch this now. The answer to those questions is, they are not usually called that. They're not usually called those terms. So why are black people, like Kiwana said, identify as one of the 31 flavors of Baskin Robbins? So I just want to just try to look at that a different way. Why is that external identifier? Why is that needed when you look at other races? You don't hear that term because nothing comes to your mind. It's not examples of that. So that's how I just try to think about it. Why is that so? Let's get into the why behind that. What does that say? What does that mean? What does that imply about how we just racialize certain things and terms?
That's a really good point, Michael. I hadn't thought about it that way. Caitlin, what do you say to this? Have you ever been called chocolate?
No, I've never been called chocolate. So I find it funny that from the people that have spoken so far, they've said, I've never been called that. So I don't really have too much to add, but Michael's point was really, really good. I never would have thought of that.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't really have much to add on top of that.
Okay. Lauren, what do you say? Do you have anything to add to that?
Not really. I would just, if someone, like Kiwana was saying, it depends on the person who is the one saying it. If someone who is not black has the urge to call somebody who is black chocolate, I would ask why and just err on the side of caution that not everybody likes to be referred that way. So probably just best not to use the word if you're unsure.
That's a great point, Lauren. I'm gonna put an A by your name. Okay. Second question. How does it affect you when people quote known slaveholders like Jonathan Edwards, George Whitfield in theology, specifically as it relates to revival and the Great Awakening, knowing they were slaveholders? Michael, let's start with you on this one.
All right. Yes. Well, I think first it needs to acknowledge the blind spots that they had. So you can quote them, but it needs to acknowledge the blind spots they had. Then it should cause you to ask yourself the question, what blind spots do I have? Because guess what? The person you are quoting, who, you're quoting them for a reason, they had blind spots. So you should say, okay, if they had blind spots and I'm quoting them, I may have blind spots too I need to address. A preacher once said that we all know I have blind spots. The problem is I don't know what they are. So that's why it's important to be in community and so forth. And I'll finish with this. Finally, and it relates to this, do all the people you quote look like you?
Good points again, Michael. Caitlin just dropped the mic. Caitlin, do you have anything you want to add to that? How does it affect you when known slaveholders are quoted, knowing they were, slaveholders, especially when it comes to revival and the Great Awakening?
I don't want to go after Michael anymore. I don't. So
None of us do.
No. There's no point in me continuing to speak on the topic when he pretty much nailed it. So no.
Okay, Kawana, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I'm not scared. I'll speak after my husband. So internally, I'll just sometimes I just do an internal eye roll, and we keep it going. And sometimes I just ask myself, is there no one else to quote? And sometimes, once again, if you look at, historically speaking, once again, who were these people? What did they do? What did they contribute to the overall ideology of even the American Revolution that that even ensued after that? So once again, valid ideologies came from that. So all that aside, I even would say, I think they were more Pharisaic, and Jesus said, all right, do what they say, but not what they do. So I would say that, and that it actually bothers me more to hear these people referred to as heroes of the faith than anything else. Because, once again, if you're going to be a hero, whose hero are you? What elements of heroism did they display? And I don't think Jesus would agree that slave owning would have been one of them.
Great points, Kawana. Tim, you have anything to add to that?
Your question was during the Great Awakening, correct? Am I correct?
Yes.
In the statement?
Mhm.
Who woke up? And I mean, everybody's waking up now. I'm just saying, the Great Awakening. It was just, it's hard to put into terms when I look back, or I've read like on the Southern Baptist Convention of how that was started and things like that, on slavery. So it's really hard to think that today's church is awake fully. The Great Awakening started, but it has taken now something to really wake us and shake us up. It's, and Michael hit it, it's like, are the people that you're referencing look like you? I mean, I was listening to a pastor on a call Sunday night, and he was talking about, he's a Black pastor, then, he's getting his sermons together, he's writing through, and then he has to go, and he feels obligated to go and check on a white pastor's, just like a reference. And he's like, why do I do that? Why do I feel compelled to have to do that? I mean, not that it was wrong, but he just, is the white pastor's voice more valid than a Black person's? So, so he had to question himself, he's questioned himself with that. But I just think that we are waking up now, or, we need to be waking up. And this right here is a part of that Great Awakening 2.0.
Good points, Tim. Okay, so Lauren actually helped us with a lot of our vocabulary. Thank you, teacher Lauren. She gave us many words to look up and kind of define those words. And then there are a whole list of questions with those. So if you have looked up any of these words, we've got all of our paperwork here. If you've looked up any of these words, let's kind of just make sure that everybody knows that we have that whole list. And these are some of the words, and then we're going to go through the questions. The words were anti-racist, microaggression, whitelash, racial justice, racial reconciliation, racism, restorative justice, white supremacy, gentrification, cultural appropriation, white privilege, tone policing, performance activism, or performative allyship. Okay, so those are all the words that we were supposed to look up and become familiar with, make sure that we knew all of those terms. And so these questions are for anybody who is not Black on this panel to ask these questions. what clarifying questions do you have for any of these terms? What clarifying questions do you have for any of these terms? Let's ask Chris. Do you want to, Chris, oh, sorry, Amaro, sorry, forgot there was two of you. Chris A, do you have a question about any of these terms you would like to ask?
Yeah, I think the one term that I had a question about, I'll just say it that way, was gentrification. And the reason I had a question for it, David's laughing because he knows I did a ton of study on it. I did quite a bit of research on the term and just the impact that it's made on various cities around the nation. Actually found a thesis that was written by a postgrad at Iowa State by the name of Antoinette Folks. And she did her thesis last year or her postdoctorate on MGCRP, basically community planning, like her graduate was on community planning and regional planning. And her study was on Birmingham from 1980 to 2010. And it was actually a very interesting study. It's about a 29-page paper that's been published. But what came out of it basically was that, and I'll just read you some of the quotes that she has. On page 6 that she wrote that Peter Marcuse in 1985 wrote that gentrification can be seen in neighborhoods when new residents that are disproportionately young, white, professional, technical, managerial workers with higher education and income levels replace older residents who disproportionately are low income, working class, poor, minority, elderly, and ethnic group members from older deteriorated inner circle housing in a spatially concentrated manner that is differing substantially from the generational level of change in the community or a region as a whole. Sounds just like a thesis, right? That's way overloaded. But the point that she was making with this quote was young people come in and they occupy an area, they take their newfound income and they pump money into their own residence, which then becomes kind of a trend. And you see this kind of boom grow kind of naturally from other people moving into an area that is a low cost, and things change in the neighborhood. And we see this everywhere. So the question is, or the actions that she was concerned about, is that reality is a double-edged sword. It's because you've got people coming in and boosting an area, which is great because it increases the value of the property and the neighborhood. But you've also got people that are then displaced because they can't afford to keep up, essentially. And so what do we do about that? And there's a whole lot more detail about that I don't want to get into here. But what I found, though, in her paper were there were 4 actions that we could take. And I don't want to read all of these to you because they're quite lengthy, just like the rest of her paper. But one of them that I loved was promote meaningful engagement with neighborhoods to create a shared understanding of the threats of neighborhood reinvestments and gentrification to ensure the most vulnerable neighborhoods are prioritized. And so when reading that, I could definitely see where we have a concern as residents or neighbors to ensure that people aren't sort of shoved out, because their property values increase so much they can't afford the taxes to live there anymore. And you would think that that'd be a good thing, but in certain situations, it's just not. So the question that I have that ties all this, to wrap all this up into a box for you, is that a part of systemic racism, or is that just a part of happenstance? Is this just a fact that happens? And I was just going to kind of get some feedback from y'all on what you thought about that.
Lauren, what do you think?
I feel like I'm going to get picked on a lot tonight. I think it is both. Thank you. We know that historically there are a lot of racial housing practices, redlining, that sort of thing, that have been put in place. So I think it is a double-edged sword. And I did a documentary on it when I was in school. And it's such a strange phenomenon, but I do believe that it's both. I do believe that it's, people are moving into this place because it's cheaper, but I also feel like there is a racial element to that too. Because like, who is moving into this place? Why is this area cheaper? And usually the area is cheaper sometimes because of things like redlining. Like there weren't resources being pumped into that town, city to begin with because of those practices. So I believe it's both.
Okay, I have a question about the exact same term, because we were talking about this, and we did some research too, because one of the ways that this term is used is also not just in the housing arena, but in behavioral arena, meaning, to gentrify, to have others act in a way that you think is gentlemanly or more polite or whatever the case may be. And sometimes people even associate that with more white acting, even sometimes more American acting in some cultures. So when people go on trips to other cultures, or even here in the United States, when somebody is white and they're in maybe a black culture, primarily black culture, and they want people to speak the way they do, or act the way they do, or see time the way they do. Have you seen that play out as a part of gentrification, and how can we fight against that? Kawana?
That's a little loaded. Honestly, I'm going to have to go back to what I said a few weeks ago when I quoted this guy from TED Talk. So that's going to go back to the LIE acronym, LIE. So learn, implement, and embrace. So once again, what we're doing right now, learning from each other. What can we implement to make sure that people feel that they can be who they are or act really how they are. So embrace them for who they really are, and just knowing, and that's just going to come a little bit with, once again, what we're doing now, and even with trust. Michael and I were kind of listening to a little podcast before we got on tonight. And one of the things that a African American said to another Caucasian was that, hey, this process is going to take trust, because even when Black people are talking amongst themselves, there's already like a level of trust that's like already built. Us, we're all the same color, and then to invite somebody else into the conversation, it's like, all right, can we trust you with this information? And now that you have this information, what are you going to do with it? Are you just going to sit on it, or are you going to flip it and use it against us? Or, are you truly going to be an ally? So that's, once again, even with gentrification, I think that's part of it right there, in terms of acting a certain way, or to make sure that no one is forced into acting in a way that's not of them.
Okay, Natasha had a question that is similar to this.
Thanks, Cheryl. So in regards to your question, because I know when we went to Guatemala, I have some rainbow glasses, and Cheryl was like, okay, that makes you look American. Like, that's an American thing. Don't wear so much color. So I didn't wear my glasses. But in going to what you were saying about gentrification regarding behavior wise, how is that different than code switching? Because they sound a lot alike. Is it the same, or is there a difference? Yeah.
Caitlin. Okay, let me ask it this way, Caitlin.
Lauren,
Yes.
no, Lauren was wanting to answer the question.
Lauren just sent me a text and she said, make Caitlin answer this. No, I'm just kidding.
Lauren?
She did not. I'm kidding. Okay. So if not just gentrification meaning housing, but if we think about it in that way, the secondary meaning, which is somebody's behavior ought to reflect my own, as if white behavior or whatever is more gentlemanly, as the term
more refined.
Yeah, more refined. The whole term kind of means. How is that different than code switching? What do you think? How would you say those are different, Caitlin? Yes, I'm calling on you.
No, okay. I'm sorry. Will you ask me the question one more time?
Yeah. Okay. So think about code switching. When you think about gentrification, meaning sometimes for white people that it means I think somebody of another culture ought to act the way I'm acting because I think for some reason that the way I'm acting is more refined, because really it started in England, that whole idea of somebody being a gentleman being more refined, of course. That how is that different than code switching? Or how do you think they even relate?
Okay, so you're saying one, what would you, I know the code switching part, what would you call the other one? Like maybe
Gentrification, meaning like behavioral gentrification, not meaning like the housing and moving into an area, but the whole idea that some other culture ought to reflect what I would think, you know, I don't mean me personally, but what white people would think is more refined, as in talking more refined, acting more refined, dressing a certain way, whatever the case may be.
I mean, I guess the behavioral gentrification is almost one of them is quote unquote maybe forced or expected. The other one is a choice of the Black person that decides to do that. Tim is nodding his head, so I feel like I'm good. Okay. Whew. I didn't know where I was going with that. So I guess if you're forcing me to do something like, and Black people have chosen to code switch for many reasons. I think a main reason is just for survival and to kind of blend in. But the other one is, but I'm going to force you to do this because this is the way that it should be done. And I don't agree with that.
Okay, so gentrification is more of an expectation of people to reflect their own culture. Very good, Caitlin. Look at you. I gave Lauren an A. Let me give Caitlin an A. Okay. Tim, what do you say to that? What were you saying? Because you were shaking your head yes. So what were you thinking?
No, I was I'm honestly I was in the chat about to respond, but Caitlin, you know, you took it. You're right. Code switching is by choice. It's not that someone is imposing this upon you or you say that you have to do this. Gentrification, to be, you know, it's like, well, you should talk like this or you should act like this. No, I should be who I am. And you're right, code switching had to be, I mean, was really brought about just to kind of blend in or fit into the system, into the working system. So, but someone coming to say, you know, that you should act like this, that's not, I mean, you know, someone acting, I mean, and someone implying that or putting that upon you, that's not good. And then just going back to gentrification itself, you know, just thinking about it, you know, you say somebody comes in, this young couple comes into this neighborhood, gathers up this house at a low price and builds, and that builds the property value. I've seen out in Texas to where, yeah, I mean, people have come into these low cost areas and have bought 2 lots for, you know, little nothing and built $1 million homes on there. Yeah, that, you know, that property skyrocketed, but you're right, that neighbor that can't afford that is driving their, you know, it's driving their costs up, it's forcing them out of where they are. Once again, I see it as being, you know, generational wealth being put into play. You're coming out, you know, you're buying this at a low cost, you're building this on there, and then that's something that's more value now that you can pass on down. So that's just, once again, that's my 2 cents.
Okay, does somebody else have a question? Did you have one? I'm sorry.
Yeah, just along the lines of clarifying gentrification and code switching, I think I mean, I feel like I understand those terms, but I need to clarify, would it be fair to say that code switching is oftentimes the response of someone who feels possibly gentrification being imposed upon them? You know what I'm saying? Does that make, I mean, is that, like, if for example, if you are in a, I don't know, a work situation where you may be the only person of color in that department or whatever, and you sense that you're experiencing this behavioral gentrification is going on, is code switching your response to that, or in order to kind of deal with it, or are those too far apart for that to happen? Does that make sense? I mean, are they that closely linked? I guess what I'm trying to figure out, because I understand clearly that code switching is really your choice. That's when you choose to, but I guess within the culture that we live in, or the climate that we live in, I guess, do you feel impressed or driven to code switching because of gentrification? If that may be.
I think, and especially going with that of behavioral gentrification, I'm seeing that as something that the end goal for gentrification is to change, and for there to be more of a permanent change. And even thinking about with the whole real estate thing of the neighborhood going through gentrification, and if the process is to refine a person, then you want to change their behavior for what you think is the best. And so therefore, I don't see you being able to go back to where you were because of gentrification in that way. Whereas code switching, hey, I come in, I clock in, I do what I have to do, I speak how I have to do, I go back home, I take my wig off if I need to, let the braids down, do whatever, and I'm back to me. And then I get to do it all over again to fit in, So once again, I see behavioral gentrification as a long-term, once again, the whole refining process of getting me to that point, and when I'm there, I'm there.
Yeah.
Okay, that's
in
addition to that. Yeah, go ahead,
So
Tim.
I guess, Kawana, could you say permanent versus temporary? Okay.
Look at us, define the terms. Okay, does anybody else have a clarifying question you want to ask about one of these terms before we move to the second question? I'm trying to look. Okay, Chris Kinsley.
So this one's on white fragility. So I should start off that I've not read the book that has popularized that term. So it also could be that I don't have a good understanding of the term in and of itself. But I see the term discussed in other places as a form of white defensiveness. I think the Wikipedia entry puts it along with like white denial and white diversion. But when I read more articles about white fragility, it uses examples of denial and diversion as examples of white fragility. Is white fragility a synonym for white defensiveness, or is it a specific type? It seems to be somewhat of a catch-all. And so, yeah.
Okay, Lauren.
Hey, Cheryl, real quick, can I just read the definition?
Yes, go ahead.
There's a definition on racial equity tools. It says it's a state in which even a minimum amount of racial stress becomes intolerable for white people, triggering a range of defensive moves. These moves include outward displays of emotion, such as anger, fear, and guilt, and behaviors such as argumentation, silence, and even leaving a stress-induced situation. These behaviors, in turn, function to help reinstate the white racial equilibrium. Now, Lauren, sorry.
Yeah, I think thank you for reading that. I think it is defensiveness, and it's when, like, for example, online, I'll see somebody who is talking about a topic where race is involved. For example, someone posted a video about the history of country music and how Black people played a major part in creating country music. And in the comments of those videos, there were different things like, why do we have to make everything about race? Why do we, sometimes it can be as simple as all lives matter. I'm colorblind. Like, it's just, it's a, when the topic of race is being brought up, there is a sense of defensiveness to it or diversion to it. And that can come in all different kinds of reactions. Does that answer your question? Does that clarify that?
I think it makes it sound like it is a synonym for defensiveness, that it's not some specific type of something.
No, it's basically defensiveness, but like specifically for racial issues.
So can I ask a follow-up to it then?
Mm-hmm.
Is it, because some of what I read was making the case that, hey, white people are fragile when it comes to race issues because we are used to being the dominant race, or to not even having to think about race because we are the dominant race. Is it possible then that I think I feel fragile around race issues because I don't know that I hope I am not always defensive about them. Is it possible for me to appropriately recognize and acknowledge, even in conversation with brothers and sisters like on this call on race issues, that I can acknowledge my fragility without being defensive? Is there a line between the two somewhere?
I think we can, I mean, there's vulnerability in saying, well, this is uncomfortable, and recognizing like, hey, this is an uncomfortable conversation. I'm still dealing with this. I'm still processing what this means to me. And I think that can be a very true and honest and vulnerable statement that can be made without being defensive. I think it's different than saying, just flat out being, well, no, you're wrong. I don't see it that way. Why do we have to talk about race? Why do we always have to bring this up? I think that's different than, we're having this conversation. It makes me a little uncomfortable, but I still want to have this conversation with you. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Anybody else want to jump in and?
Well, I'll just jump in because, I was just doing a little bit of research on this today too. And so I haven't read the book yet, but I actually have one quote. I have several, but I'll read this one. I think it applies, by Robin DiAngelo, the author of White Fragility. And following upon that, she says this: the key to moving forward is what we do with our discomfort. We can use it as a door out, blame the messenger, and disregard the message. So you have one of those D words again: disregard, defensive, deflect, so forth. Or we can use it as a door in by asking, why does this unsettle me? What would it mean for me if this were true? So I think that kind of goes to that. What do you do with that discomfort?
That's really good.
And I think that's what I meant about like being honest with your being uncomfortable is fine. That's different than saying, well, I don't want to talk about this. Why do we have to talk about this?
Okay, does somebody else have another question about a term? Okay, Becca, you have one, and then Ross, I'll come to you next.
I'll be quick. I just wanted to ask to clarify cultural appropriation. I mean, I grew up on some Amy Grant and Sandy Patty, but really I learned to sing by CeCe and BB Winans and Larnell Harris and Aretha Franklin. I'm not saying I can sing like that. And I'm just saying those were the voices I listened to. Those were the songwriters I listened to. And so how do we honor, share, participate in what for me I didn't realize it? To me it seems, oh, this might offend, I'm so sorry, but to me it's part of my culture upbringing. Like it's part of my story to know those artists. So I've never felt like I've stolen them from the Black culture. So can you just maybe give some better definition to what is culture appropriation and what is appreciating things about Black culture and being able to make them a part of your story as well?
Similar, a young man who grew up with athletes, who may say, well, I've got, black athletes, or I'm a baseball player and I've got these athletes, but that becomes a part of your culture. You're saying you're learning the song, following those, but I think it's a very similar thing with a young athlete a lot of times.
Kawana, you're a singer, so what would you say to that?
I'm a long way from Aretha. So in terms of a cultural appropriation, this is the definition that I found. So let me do this one first. Theft of cultural elements for one's own use or profit, including symbols, art, language, customs, etc., often without understanding, acknowledgement, or respect for its value in the original culture. So that's the definition that I found. So when I think of, once again, cultural appropriation, to me, it's like, okay, hey, and David and I, we joke back and forth and talk about different styles of music all the time. So it's like, hey, I really appreciate, this group, this era, blah, blah, blah. I try to even modify my style based upon this, something similar to what Becca's already said, because I just have an appreciation for it. And that goes with the acknowledgement. All right, it's not like, all right, I'm just gonna take this song. It's really from this culture, but I'm not going to say anything about it. And honestly, as Becca was talking, I was thinking about the movie based upon Little Richard's life. And when he was coming out with Tutti Frutti, there's a part in the movie where he is singing it. Yeah, he's the original. He came out with it first, okay? And there's another artist, I don't know who was trying to copy it, but there was like, a white radio, black radio thing, of course. And so a white artist was trying to record it and make it his. All right, Little Richard was already established. He already recorded it. It was out there, but it was trying to be played more so on white radio without acknowledging Little Richard and him singing it. And it didn't go over as well because he couldn't get it as fast or to the beat or with the energy and so forth that Little Richard brought to it. And in the movie, it's constantly showing them, they're going, look, you got to go faster. Telling the white guy, you got to be faster. Another take, you got to be faster. It's like he couldn't bring it. So it's one thing to say, hey, I love this artist, I love this culture, I love this style of music, and I'm going to try to make it my own, but still give that, once again, just that acknowledgement, and not just say, this is mine, I did it. And I think that's where that's coming from.
That's really good. Thank you, Kawana. Okay, Ross, you had something, right?
Yes, I'll add a couple things because I had read about a couple of those questions that have been brought up that were helpful to me, and they may be helpful to someone else. But gentrification, it talked about, usually it's the involuntary displacement of the people that are there. It's one thing if people have owned their home and they're allowed, this might be a wealth building opportunity. It's another if they've been forced due to redistricting or white flight or things like that, and they're having to rent, and then rents go up and then they're forced out. Are you bringing in fast food chains, or are you letting the local culture be, letting them advance and all these types of things? So I think there's two different aspects. I think the involuntary is the big key word. And then with appropriation, like Juana said, that a book I was listening to talked about that you might like hip hop rap music, but if you're truly a fan of that music and that style, you understand the history of it, you understand the pain that brought it out, you understand the way it was used to speak against current things going on. So all of that is going to make you appreciate it more and be much more careful about just stepping in and pretending like it's yours. And so as far as my question, I can't claim it as my own. Someone had posed the question, something I read, but it was talking about racial reconciliation, and that the term reconciliation implies that you were once together and unified, which I don't think we can say has been the case. So do you feel that, has anyone else thought that for some time and has been bothered by the term? Do you think we need a different term that we should be using? Or do we just understand like, hey, this is a flawed term, but we don't currently have a better one?
Yeah, keep one ahead there, because see.
All right. Well, Michael, we can tag team off this one. We can tag team off this one. So a few days ago, we got a message, and that we shared it with David and Cheryl, that it was from a D.A. Horton. D.A. Horton was writing in his book, and I cannot remember the title, but I just shared the snippet with them, that basically he was saying we can't have racial reconciliation because, number one, there's only one race. All right. We're all in total agreement with that. It's only the human race. And that, once again, reconciliation implies that everything, like Ross said, we were once together and there was some type of falling out or misunderstanding, and we need to come together in agreement on what the problem was, how to fix it, to reconcile. All right, so D.A. Horton proposes the term ethnic conciliation. So we're all different ethnicities in one race. We got style first. Michael, I know you got something.
I mean, no, you said, I mean, that's it. It's ethnic conciliation, one race. And yeah, you have to come together the first time before you can, then to have a break to be able to be reconciled. So we know the history past 400 years. So there have been no conciliation in the first place. So how can you have reconciliation? So that was very helpful.
Yeah, and just to speak on that, One Blood by John Perkins, I've been listening to that book, and it talks about exactly, he's a Black man that was raised during the, in Mississippi, oh gosh, in the early 30s, something like that. He dropped out of school in between the third and fifth grade, but he's gone on to do a lot of great things. But he was talking about we are one blood, like I was stating earlier when we start off with the prayer, that there's just one race. And he says ethnic reconciliation, because early on, that's what we don't know the color of Adam and Eve. We have no idea, but we look at it, and during the fall of the Tower of Babel, it kind of split the languages, but it was supposed, still the word was going to be proclaimed throughout all the nations by Matthew 28. We see that, but it should be an ethnic reconciliation as opposed to race, because we're just, we are just one race. So there's something that I'm picking up from this book, and I'm really enjoying it. Really enjoying it.
That's really good, guys. That's really good. Okay, the second question says, and this is, we may have already talked a little bit about this, but it says, which word or words impacted you the most? How did they make you feel, react, and or reflect? So any of those terms that we just talked about, which of those words impacted you the most? Jessica, can I call on you for this one? Which of those words do you think impacted you the most?
I was actually going to ask that exact same question as Ross about reconciliation. So before we go on, can I just share this quote? And I know of this quote, I cannot pronounce the name of the person that it originally came from. I know of it from a Lecrae song, but it says, so reconciliation or conciliation requires defrauded parties to be made whole, not just apologizing for the offense. And so every time I hear that, like conciliation, not reconciliation, I'm just like, well, yeah, that makes total sense, because we're not redoing something. We got to be reconciled for the first time. So that's the one I'll comment on. Do you want to give me a specific one, or?
No, that was good. That was good. What about you, Amaros? What would y'all say? Which word impacted you the most?
For me, it was performative allyship. This has been something that I feel like social media has been plagued with for the past couple of years, and most recently. So I'll read the definition real quick. So performative allyship, Holiday Phillips, she's a sociologist that wrote on a blog about this. An ally is someone from a non-marginalized people group who uses their privilege to advocate for a marginalized group, and they transfer their benefits or their privilege, or of their privilege to those who lack it. Performative allyship, on the other hand, is when someone from that same non-marginalized group professes to support and solidarity with a marginalized people group in a way that either isn't helpful or that actively harms that group. And usually it involves the ally receiving some kind of reward, like a pat on the back on social media, that's just being done for being a good person or on the right side of the fight, basically. So, this is a real eye opener for me. I'm sure I'm guilty of this in my past for just posting something with a hashtag and thinking that was, dignifying or worth something. When in reality, if you could go back and look at it and say, oh, well, he just posted that because he felt like that was the thing to do. I know my heart, I know where my heart is in it, but it's that perspective of, are you really doing this so that people will look at you and say, hey, way to go? Or are you doing it because your heart matters, and that person that you're trying to help's heart matters more than what you're going to get out of it? And hopefully you're doing it because you're not getting anything out of it. You're just trying to help someone else. And so I was reading through that lady's blog, and I love this. I can't believe I'm about to quote this person on this call, but she says, hang on, let me find it real quick. She quotes and says, basically, do something that no one will ever know. This is how we conquer performative allyship. Do something that no one will ever know. As Lil Wayne says, real G's move in silence like lasagna. So basically, the G is silent in lasagna. If I had to explain that. But that's as believers, that's really what we're supposed to be doing, is just helping people. I'm loving the laughing faces, without tooting our own horn or hoping that someone sees us do this. Wendy was telling me a story today about this amazing man that helped this young Black child in a situation, and he posted the story of him helping him, and there was a GoFundMe account created, and they raised like some $300,000 or something like that. It was ridiculous what the community did to come together for this child and his family. And we use that as an example. And the point being is, if he had just posted and said, hey, I met a young Black boy that's homeless today and I bought him some donuts, hashtag Black Lives Matter. That's different than actually doing what he did and causing an uproar, which caused a huge amount of money to be raised for his family and so on and so forth. Again, reality is we should just do things without anybody seeing what we're doing, because that's what we're called to do. It's just to love one another.
That's good, Chris. And thank you for that quote.
From Lil Wayne.
The teenagers laughed. Okay. Davis family, what would you say? Not Landry, sorry.
Landry said no, I didn't.
Lou said no. Okay, Davis family, what words impacted you the most from this whole group of words?
This might actually go to the first question as well. I'll throw it in with impacted us, or just when I think of the two words, and I've got some maybe illustrations, and I want to ask a question with the illustrations, or examples, maybe is a better way to say that. When you think of micro, and we think about racism. And so at what point is the line between, okay, this was a microaggression and this is just racism? And so does that make sense when I ask that question? Because now obviously I can think of something like a microaggression as simple as, I don't do dishes, I'm a man. That's obviously something that somebody could say and be like, okay, that's a microaggression. I'm actually making a statement about a woman does dishes, not a man, which, by the way, I don't believe that. I was doing them tonight. But it is at what point is there a line? And so I want to give an example, and then I want you to help me kind of identify where would these two be, because as I looked at these illustrations and thought about them in these particular words, I have a friend who adopted a child, and they adopted a child from another culture in another country. They were living in the South, not Alabama, but they were living in the South, and they were at a grocery store, and somebody asked them the question, what kind is she? And so is that a microaggression or is that racism? Does that make sense? The question I'm asking?
That sounds like straight up racism to me.
And so that's where I'm just asking the question between these two lines, because I would agree it's a racist statement, correct? But sometimes a microaggression, so what's the difference there between a microaggression and a racist statement? Does that make sense as I look for that line? At the end of the day, they're both wrong, right? But at what point would somebody be able to say, no, you're a racist, that's a racist statement? And what point is it just simply saying it's an ignorant statement, which we all know racism is ignorant in itself?
So I think, okay, so you can have different types of microaggression. Like the example you gave about, I don't do dishes, I'm a man, women's work, that sort of thing. That's a like sexist microaggression. You can have racist microaggressions. So microaggressions on a racial term is racism. Me personally, that's what I think. I think it's a racial microaggression is racism. I saw a kind of like a chart online where it has like a little pyramid, and it kind of broke down like the levels of racism, or what people would consider racism. And at the top, it was like the most common examples people would think of when they think racism: acts of violence, different racial groups, hate crimes, that sort of thing. But underneath that was all of the little things that can also be racist. And underneath that was microaggressions. So, and in that category is microaggression. So you have different kinds of microaggressions, but when a microaggression is related to race, that's racism.
That's good, Lauren. And you also see, and there are a couple of us here, 3 of us I know of, that would say we've seen that in the adoption world, and it kind of comes with adoption too. Although white parents who have white children say that they don't get asked those same questions of what type is she, how much did they cost, are they yours, as if they're belong to somebody else. I don't know. So that when adoption and especially multicultural or multi-ethnicity adoptions take place, we see those comments where people who are Black with Black adopted children or white with white adopted children may not see those exact same questions. But we do see those, especially across cultural lines or ethnic lines. When it comes to adoption, we do get those kind of questions like what is she? I don't know, an orange, an apple, a piece of beef. I don't know what they're asking. What is she? Nobody asks my other kids, what are they? But hey, we're running kind of out of time, so I want to try to get to this next question. I'm going to skip one and just go to this part. What steps have you taken as a result of your anti-racist journey, and what resources have you found helpful? Because we've had several people say resources in the chat, so I want us to say them out loud. What resources have you specifically found helpful? So Jennifer, let's go to you first.
I think resources, I think a lot of movies that Tim and I watched together, like that he either has suggested to me or other people have suggested, have been really, really helpful to just kind of see something that I may not have seen or understood well. Also the books, several of the books that we've been reading, I've not read fully through any of them. So I need to like stop and focus on one and get it all the way read. But like Be the Bridge, also, oh my goodness, I just went blank. Divided by Faith. Those have been very helpful. But I think too, just listening to people like we've been doing here has been super helpful. And just stepping back and looking at things that I may not understand or understood to be true in my world. And just, there's still several movies I want to see that have been suggested by friends and family. So I just don't have all the time to take it all in at one time. So it's going to take a while to kind of get through it and do it the right way, I think, because there's been so much recently that has, been shared because of what's going on, that I think I just need to kind of sit in one thing at a time and digest it fully, if that makes any sense at all. But
Yeah, for sure. Jessica, what would you say? What's one or two resources you would say have been very helpful to you in this journey?
Okay, I'm going to go fast. I bet a lot of people have books to recommend, so I'm going to say podcasts because I like listening. So some podcasts, United We Pray is one. Next, 1619, Pass the Mic, Footnotes with Jamar Tisby, and then a good one for white people who were just starting this journey is a podcast called Seen on Radio, and they have a series called Seeing White, and it will blow your mind in a bad way. But that's what and for Christians, I think you should read the book Color of Compromise. It's the history of racism in the church.
Oh, that's good. Amaro's.
There's a stack of books in front of me that we were going to talk about, but one of them that I don't know if has been mentioned here, Wendy just read this past weekend, the Lecrae book, phenomenal, Unashamed. But yeah, some of the movies that we've seen over the past couple of weeks, and I know it's Hollywood, but some of them have been pretty authentic. We watched Harriet last night. Oh man, like that moment when she steps over the state line into Philadelphia, I don't think the hair has stopped standing up on my arms yet. Like it was so powerful and impactful. And I get it, it's Hollywood, but still, like Just Mercy, these movies are just phenomenal at showing real pain. And we were talking earlier, if you really want to see, like, I guess a picture of hatred, in the sense that that's how, especially in Harriet, how the white man is the white slave owner is portrayed. You can see that same kind of hatred, if not maybe, I don't want to say worse, but you can see that same kind of hatred in some of the World War II movies, like Dunkirk and Greyhound. Not necessarily white on black, but obviously German on the rest of the world. Like that hatred is still there, and it's still a perfect picture of sin. And it's the same kind of anger that we can all derive back to one thing, and that's pride, which is killing our hearts in all of this. So, but yeah, no, I mean, the movies have been phenomenal. It's something that I actually mentioned this past week on our podcast. One of the most impactful things that Michael mentioned on when we were interviewing him on the podcast was just living among, just living with one another. I get that that's kind of hard to do right now with COVID, but when we get to actually be with one another, I think that's going to be the biggest tool in our tool bag, is sharing life with one another, and just breaking down those barriers of, well, I got my white circle over here and you got your black circle over there. That's all going to go away. We're just going to be with one another and be in each other's lives. And that's going to be the biggest tool we have against racism.
Okay. Davis family, do y'all have a book or article or anything that you feel like has been helpful in this journey?
I've been listening to a class that Jason Cook has done out of Fellowship Memphis on A Better Together, talking a lot about the history of Black people all the way back to, all the way back. And just, I've been amazed at, even with a Master's of Divinity, I've been amazed about all of the people that were never talked about. So I think for me, I think the biggest thing that I've done to further my anti-racist journey is admitting my fragility, in the sense that I didn't see myself as being a racist person. I tried very hard to go against that. But in doing so, I still had a lot of blinders on. And so I think I kind of unintentionally whitewashed how Black people should feel now, just because I was never taught what really happened. And so my step in being anti-racist is hitting the pause button on what I know and trying to learn the real story, because I think that's the only thing that really helps me move forward. Otherwise, I just feel caught in, but wait, that's not how I feel. That's not how it should be. And just because it's not how I feel and not how it should be doesn't mean that's not how it is. Doesn't mean that that's not how my Black friends feel.
That's good. Chris Kinsley, do you have any particular books or anything like that that has been helpful to you?
Yeah, I'm a reader, so they're going to be all books. One is Beyond Racial Gridlock by George Yancey. This is George Yancey with an E from the University of North Texas, not George Yancey without an E from Emory. That's important. They both write in this realm. Anyway, it's excellent. It looks at a bunch of different approaches to addressing the issue of racism from a sociological perspective, and then tries to offer what a Christian perspective might be. And he speaks as a person of color to both majority people group, majority race and minority races. And I think it's excellent, challenging for both. Mother to Son by Jasmine Holmes is a short read, and it's written as letters to her son, as the title might suggest. And it is sneaky good. Like anyone who is real, even Jessica was recommending, like someone who's new to this conversation, maybe are extremely fragile to the point of very defensive. So she covers so much in such a short amount of time, and the way she's doing it in letters to her son makes it your walls naturally come down. And I think she's doing a lot. And I will say, she's the daughter of a very prominent evangelical Black personality that lots of white people weaponize. And so hearing her perspective is very helpful. She's Voda Belkin's daughter. Y'all can cut that out. And then the third one is honestly John Piper's Bloodlines. I think it is so excellent, and especially because he talks about his personal story and journey. And again, it just is helpful for some people to start with a Piper book, even though I wish they'd read George Yancey and Jasmine Holmes. Sometimes it helps them to start by reading Piper, and his is good.
Those are great. I'd like to borrow some of those, Chris. David, you said you had a couple of resources?
Yes, so the place where I found those definitions from earlier, and it's come to after obviously listening to Michael Kawana, the text that we have going, it's great that we prayerfully sit and listen, but they are not responsible for our education. They provide us perspective. Some websites that can be helpful: racialequitytools.org, also EJI.org, which is the Equal Justice Initiative down in Montgomery. Phenomenal resources in history at the museum there. 2 books that aren't so much on current events, but if you want to look for somebody to drop you into a perspective of kind of some of the burden that's taken place, Ernest Gaines has 2 books called Gathering of Old Men and A Lesson Before Dying. Short reads, powerful, will bring tears to your eyes. I have a copy. Anybody's welcome to borrow them as well. Yeah.
I know for our family, just watching Just Mercy, we've watched it multiple times, has been extremely difficult, but also eye-opening, because it takes place in the county right next to the county where David and I grew up. And we knew about that story. So it's a tough watch, but it's a good one. And of course, 13th was very eye-opening. And there's also the Instagram videos about difficult Uncomfortable Conversations with a Young Black Man or something like that. Caitlin, aren't you the one who sent me that? Or maybe it was Lauren. Caitlin was. I had watched one of them with the Gaines family, and then I think the one he's doing tonight has to do with white people adopting Black children. So I'm going to go back and watch that one as well. And then, of course, just like Jen said, the Be the Bridge book is an excellent book by Latasha Morrison. And it's a great book with lots of great questions in it as well.
Hey, Cheryl.
I really hope McLean Bible Church does something with what they're doing. I'm getting a lot out of that. And I mean, it's like secret church every Sunday, but so it's a lot, but I'm hoping that they'll put together a resource that can be put out there for other people.
Yeah, and they do have a whole series, McLean Bible Church, I think it's /race or something on their website that has all these different conversations with all of their different pastors. And it's extremely well done and just gives a variety of voices, different ethnicities. And it's really, really interesting. Let me get to this last question so we can wrap this up. It says, how has your space been altered by committing to anti-racist work? Meaning, have you noticed a difference with talking to family members, friends, or coworkers? Does your social media timeline or newsfeed look different? How have you begun to diversify the companies or organizations you support? Basically, how are you putting feet to this anti-racist journey? What are you doing about that? Let's just start, Natasha. Let me start with you. I know you've grown up as a military, you weren't military, but you've grown up in a very multicultural world all your life. So this probably sounds a little bit different than those of us who've been in the South for so long. So how does this look different for you?
So actually, I started, my elementary was in an interracial school. And then 6th grade, I moved to an all-white school, a very racist all-white school. So, and I went going with a Black sister-in-law. So when people came at me and I heard the N-word for the first time, like I was standing up against that because it was a personal attack against me. Even though it wasn't, it was. So in regards to taking steps, my sister-in-law has been in my life since 5th grade. And I was actually, her and my brother live in Japan now. And I had, for the first time ever, a conversation with her about racism because, I was even, like I said, all white school, but I invited her to my basketball games, to my graduation. Like I was proud of her, not because of the color of her skin, because she's my family, and I could have cared less what anybody else thought. But I never thought about it from her perspective. So we had a conversation last night for the first time, yesterday, and it was really good. It was very eye-opening about a lot of things that I didn't know that they had struggled with, and a lot of things they had gone with. We do have family and culture from all over. Like we have every shade in our family, which is great. So I never knew about racism as an issue until I moved to an all-white school. So it's definitely been, in regards to pursuing, like I am having very intentional conversations with my friends, and that's a lot of where the resources that I'm getting are one-on-one conversations, whether it be through Zoom or through, Facebook or whatever. And so for me, that's kind of been the biggest thing, having conversations with my white peers from high school, and realizing some of them were attacked by the KKK, even though they're the, white friends. So that to me has been the biggest thing, is having more conversations, deeper conversations, and with family. Like I still have racist family. Like they don't understand why I would march in the MLK walk and why I would do things that aren't white per se, or that was supportive of that. So just having those real conversations, real hard conversations with families. And of course, reading resources has been a little different from from us instead of just assuming that we're all on the same page because we have Black family.
Right. Chris Kinsley, what would you say?
One would be, I think some feeds look different, and just in regards to some people I'm following and paying attention to, especially some of the authors I've mentioned, as well as many of the authors y'all have mentioned that I didn't mention. As I've read their works, want to continue to listen to them. That's been good. I think I'm avoiding some relationships right now because I don't know how I can not talk about it, and I know they're not ready for me to talk about it, and I don't know how to have those conversations, and I know that's part of my privilege to avoid them right now, but frankly, I don't know. That's what I'm doing right now. It's cowardly, but it's where I'm at. I think that's all I'll say.
I'm not sure it's so cowardly, Chris. I think sometimes it's a big wisdom pause because we don't want to say something we're going to regret. But Amaros, what would you say?
I don't want to speak for Wendy, but yeah, we're in the same boat as Chris Kinsley. We've had on both sides of our family conversations where
with our moms,
and I actually had it wasn't an argument, but it was a point counterpoint, a little bit heated, that got political, and I basically deferred, and Wendy straight up said, "I gotta go," on her phone call because
I just didn't want to deal with it over the phone with my mom. I'm like, I need to talk to you face to face, and I just couldn't deal with it at the moment. Like I was so furious at what came out of her mouth that I just was like, get off the phone with her as fast as you can and have everybody to start praying for her. And so that's what I deferred to. Will y'all please pray for my mom? Because I didn't even know where to turn. So I was like, okay, Jesus help me. Like, I don't know.
Yeah. I think we're identifying bias that we either ignored or didn't even acknowledge in the past. And it's earth shattering at times because you feel like your parents are perfect, maybe in some senses because they're your parents, and you came from them. Yeah, so it's enlightening. My grandfather, my dad's side of the family is from Sicily. His grandparents came over through Morgan City, and his dad and mother lived in Inslee until they died. They had a house over there on Avenue I, and my grandfather lived till he was 96, and my parents are still cleaning out the house. And so when I was a kid, we'd go over there, 2-3 times a month, and I'd play with the neighborhood kids, and we would hang out and we would tell jokes, and it was just like a normal everyday thing. But my parents, my dad saw the neighborhood change. He saw all the Italians move away from Inslee, and the neighborhood changed to a more Black neighborhood. And so he had opinions that I didn't even hear them. Not to say that he's inherently racist. He saw that change, and he wanted his dad to move out because initially he thought it was unsafe. Of course, his son is playing with all the neighborhood kids when they're over there in the backyard, picking pecans from the pecan tree. But it's just, I guess to wrap all that up, it's sad to hear that bias still exists, and you didn't even realize it until you're old enough to realize it, I guess.
Well, and I'll wrap it up with this is, for us, sometimes just having to say things on social media in the nicest and kindest way, but just to say, hey, why do you think that? Or what do you base that on? Or tell me where you're coming from on that. Or, that sounds off to me. What are you trying to say? And I know that Jen and I have had a lot of conversations with the exact same people. Just saying, just because you're in church and you don't see that there's a problem doesn't mean there's not one. And we've done a lot of that over the past couple of months. It's been intense, but I think it's been good too, just to have conversations with people. And I'm extremely grateful for this group and just the wisdom that you guys bring to the table, and just enlightening, and so much good stuff. I mean, you taught us so much just during the time that we've been here. So I'm so thankful that we're all on this journey together. So David, I'll kick it to you.